Blog Talk Radio.
You're listening to Smooth Talk on Cleveland Smooth Jazz, WJZZ. We have a special guest today from Martens and Sons Funeral Home, Cleveland, Ohio. Victoria Martens, how are you today?
I'm good. Thank you so much for having me on the show.
Absolutely. It's a wonderful day to have Martens and Sons Funeral Home. Located on the west side of Cleveland. Can you tell us where your funeral home is located, Victoria?
I sure can. We used to be located at 9811 Denison Avenue, which was just down the street from St. Ignatius of Antioch, the big church in the city that's got the big tower you can see from everywhere. We were at that location for 74 years, and then in January of this year, we closed that location down. And we partnered with Sloan & Company Funeral Directors, and they operate and we operate out of the same building, and that's at 13115 Lorraine Avenue. So we're just past 130th and Lorraine.
13115 Lorraine Avenue. I know exactly where you used to be because a guy I know used to own the firehouse over there across the right there, Lorraine and Denison.
Oh, yeah, so, right there. Yep, I know the one you're talking about. I think it's a taco joint now.
Right. Matter of fact, he did not bring up the Grim Reaper, but he ended up killing himself. But Martin and Sons Funeral Home, been around for the name Martens has been around for a very long time. So tell us a little bit about the history of the name Martens in Cleveland, Ohio.
Sure. So Martens has been associated with the city of Cleveland. In the early 1900s, my husband's great-grandfather opened a tailor shop on Lorraine Avenue. And then in the 30s, his grandfather and his father and several of his other relatives had Martin's Cafe down at 98th and Lorraine. And that went for many years. I mean, my husband remembers playing in the bar. That's how old it is. And then in 1948, his dad, Walter Martens Sr., and his wife, Pauline, opened the Martens Funeral Home there on Denison Avenue. And they were we've been in business, like I said, for 75 years. And since 1990, my husband has been in charge of it, Wally Martens Jr., and he has ran it since then with his brothers Eddie and Michael. So it's second generation, which is a big deal when you deal with families. They want to know that that they're going to a place where it feels like family, and we've been very proud of the fact that Martens have been so prominent in the community for so many years. And then, of course, you see our name other places. Donald Martens Ambulance is my husband's cousins, and that was founded by their father, Don Sr., who's passed away. He also used to own a funeral home in Lakewood and Westlake. And then their cousin, David Jr., still owns his dad's funeral home, which opened in 1954 on Rocky River Drive. So kind of done a little bit of everything in these 120 years, but we're very prominent in the neighborhood and very proud of it.
We're listening to Smooth Talk on Cleveland Smooth Jazz, WJZZ. We're on the phone with Victoria Martens of Martens and Sons Funeral Home at 13115 Lorraine Avenue, right?
Yes.
All right. So, Victoria, you know, the funeral business is quite interesting, and it's a few things that people might want to know. Like, for instance,
okay.
Do you have a pre-existing burial or cremation plan that someone can buy?
Yes, we do. We are proud to offer all pre-arranged funerals, either with private insurance that the consumer already has, or if you have no insurance and you're looking to purchase insurance for your pre-funded funerals, we work with a company called Funeral Directors Life Insurance Company. They're located in Abilene, Texas, and they will allow you to prepay your funeral for upwards of 10, 15, 20 years, depending on, your financial situation, how you want to do it. And we offer all of our packages to families to pre-plan, just like we would for at-need families where the death has already occurred. So it's kind of based on your preference, whether you want a cremation or a burial.
You're on the phone on Cleveland Smooth Jazz Smooth Talk with Victoria Martens of Martens and Sons Funeral Home at 13115 Lorraine Avenue. Victoria Martens, tell us a little bit. Now, this is a question everybody want to know. What makes a person want to be a funeral director?
Well, that depends on who you ask. Everybody's got different stories. In my husband's case, his father was in it, his uncles were in it, so he was just kind of expected to follow along with it. Ironically, none of his children, which are my stepchildren, have followed their father into the business. They all go out and do other things. So it's very much family based. If your father did it, normally your grandfather did it. Normally your great-grandfather has done it. There are some funeral homes that are multiple generations. And then there are the people who get into it, from the outside coming in like I did, where they have a strong desire to help people. And that is 95% of my job is helping people. We understand that we're meeting you at the worst point in your life, and nobody wants to meet the funeral director. It's an inevitable process. We're all going to, need one day. But you're coming to us and you're vulnerable and you're grieving the loss of your loved one. And our job is to help guide you through this. So you definitely have to be somebody who's very passionate about helping others, very kind, understanding, empathetic, but also with a good head on your shoulder. You still have to be able to think on your feet. You have to, have a good business attitude. You're still running a business. You're in business to make money, but you can do it without, hurting the consumer. So you have to kind of be a well-rounded person. In my case, I stumbled across the funeral profession when I was in high school. I was a journalist on the school newspaper and had been assigned a rotating column in our newspaper, the Millwright, on unusual professions that nobody thinks of. And I wound up speaking with some of the staff over at Chambers Funeral Home that had hung out with my mom for many years. And it sounded interesting. And ironically, when I first started in the funeral profession, I was working at our current location now on Lorraine Avenue. It was another funeral home at the time, but I started there and, got my feet wet, got my foot in the door, and then had an opportunity to go work with Martens. And I've been there going on 14 years now. And, had no background prior to any of that of being in the funeral business. My father's in aviation. My mother is a store clerk. So absolutely no funeral background at all. But I enjoyed helping people. And for me, with, my journalism background, I enjoyed helping people tell their loved one's story. and share those memories and, remind people who their loved one is, which is a lot of what, visitations and funeral services are, is remembering the person and the memories you made and why they're so special to you. So that was a big thing for me, was I had an ability to tell stories of people in a very unique way.
All right. We're on the phone on Smooth Talk on Cleveland Smooth Jazz, WJZZ. We're talking to Victoria Martens of Martens and Sons Funeral Home at 13115 Lorraine Avenue. You can also reach Martens and Sons Funeral Home by phone at 216-281-7111. We're on the phone with Victoria Martens, as I said, Martens and Sons Funeral Home. Now let's go back to a few other questions. Tell us about what's included in some of your costs, or what types of packages do you offer, and what types of services come within those packages?
Okay. Well, we offer both burial and cremation services. And what those can include varies based on what you select. So on the cremation side, a lot of families that we service have what's called our all-in-one day. So what that means is we pick their loved one up from their place of passing. We bring them to the funeral home. The family has a visitation, which allows their loved one's body to be present. They can gather at the funeral home, share stories, have a service prior to their loved one being cremated, which is a big deal for families because they need that closure. And oftentimes, and many times actually, you get that closure by having that service, by seeing your loved one in the casket, by being comforted by your family and friends. All of that makes a difference, which I don't think anyone, outside or even inside the funeral profession really understood or appreciated till COVID hit. And we weren't allowed to have those big services anymore. I think that made a difference. So we're glad to see that, now that COVID is, behind us, families are going back to, services like that. But we can also offer services for cremation where it's a memorial service, which means your loved one is picked up and cremated first, and then you have that same celebration or visitation with their ashes present. And again, that gives you that opportunity to have the service, be comforted by family and friends. And then there are some families where, they hire us to do what's called a direct cremation, which means we pick their loved one up, we cremate them, and return their ashes back to the family. And then they may go on later down the road and have a service of their own, or do something at a church or a party center where the funeral home isn't involved. And that's okay too. On the burial side, we see a lot of families still doing what's considered the traditional funeral, which is what most people have become accustomed to, where the visitation is the night before, your funeral services and your burial at the cemetery are the next day. But we can do that again in different ways. We have packages where we can do it all at the cemetery, and it's all, we pick your loved one up, we hold them till we're ready to bury, we go to the cemetery, we have a service at the grave site, or we have it where, again, it can all be in one day. That's the nice thing about funeral services is we can help the families meet their wishes and respect their religious, traditions and just family traditions in a variety of different ways. My coworkers refer to funerals sometimes as the cookie cutter effect, that they're all the same, but they're really not, because no person is exactly like somebody else. So we definitely strive to provide the families with that personalized service. The tradition itself may be the same, but there's still enough of you and your loved one in it to make it more personal. And those are the funerals we like doing.
Right. I'll do a quick station ID. We're on the phone.
Oh, sure.
So you'll know that we're talking to Victoria Martens of Martens and Sons Funeral Home, located at 13115 Lorraine Avenue. You can also reach Martens and Sons Funeral Home at 216-281-7111. Now, Victoria, you seem like you know a lot about funerals. I mean, I'll be honest with you. I ain't gonna lie. To me, you seem to know quite a bit about funerals. So I want to ask you a few other questions.
Okay.
How do you coordinate discussing arrangements with some of your customers? Do you go to their home? Do they traditionally come to the funeral home? Or how does that work?
Sure. Traditionally, most families will meet with us at the funeral home, which allows us a chance to take them through our showroom, which lets them see, firsthand caskets, burial vaults, which are used for caskets going in the graves at cemeteries. They can handle urns, things like that. So they really get that, ability to see the items they're purchasing sometimes prior to purchasing. But we're not opposed. We've made arrangements before at loved ones' homes where, they just feel more comfortable, or, they're not able to get to us. We can do that. I've helped make arrangements through email for families where they've been out of town. So we use email, Zoom, DocuSign, things like that. We've even made funeral arrangements over the telephone before, especially with COVID. We did a lot of arrangements over the phone or electronically, which again, was hard. But we're seeing that, once COVID restrictions came down, the families were more than willing to have us back in their homes or come to us, which was nice.
We're on the phone with Click Smooth Talk with Cleveland Smooth Jazz, WJZZ. Never said my name one time. Your host, Myron Gray, on Cleveland Smooth Jazz, WJZZ.com. We're on the phone with Victoria Martens, Martens and Sons Funeral Home, located at 131-115 Lorraine Avenue. You can reach Martens and Sons Funeral Home at 216-281-7111. We're talking about the wonderful services that Martens and Sons Funeral Homes offer when families reach that time of need. Miss Victoria Martens, can you tell us, now I know this is a strange question, but it actually happened to me. My mother's body was lost for an hour at the hospital, Lake West Hospital. They say it was because they had her name mixed up. How do you handle situations like that at Martens and Sons Funeral Home?
Very delicately, and we're very fortunate that that's not a common situation we run into, not saying that we've never seen it before. But that is one of the things that, we really strive to prevent happen. We double check tags on body bags when we get to hospitals. We double check identities at nursing homes and medical examiners' offices to make sure that, we're bringing your loved one into our care. Once they get into our care, we have our own ID system that we use. So we know where your loved one is every step of the way, whether they're being cremated or whether they're being buried. And actually, we don't normally get asked the question about loved ones being at like the hospital in your situation, but we get that question a lot with cremations. How can we guarantee that this is our loved one that we're getting back? And we like to explain to families that once your loved one goes from our funeral home to the crematory, which in this case we are very privileged to be able to use the crematory owned by Sloan & Company Funeral Directors, so your loved one never leaves our care. They're assigned a number that's on a metal disc, and that disc goes with their loved one the entire process. So during the cremation process itself, that number's on the outside of the machine the cremation is taking place in. It's on the inside of the machine. So we know without a doubt that that is your loved one. And then that tag, once the ashes are placed into the urn, that